Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. This is the Catholic Arena podcast. My name is Jerome, and joined again, as always, is Augustine. How are you doing, Augustine?
I'm good, Jerome. I'm looking forward to Mass being reopened this day next week as we speak. But before then, I suppose there's something we want to talk about today. If you want to kind of introduce that to everyone.
Yes, yeah. We came across this document from the HSC, or it's a document. It's an organization within the HSC called the Health Protection Surveillance Center. And it's entitled the COVID-19 Guidance for Religious Services. And you might think, oh, maybe this is things like social distancing and whatever, have sanitized and mask. Even though even to this day, I still find that so jarring when I see it. But it gets into a degree of detail that it almost seems malicious. Just one like. I just pick one example, which I still can't get my head around, was in terms of like if there's a soloist singer, and if she's to sing without a face mask, she has to be behind a plexiglass screen and separated 2 meters apart from everyone else, and it's incredible how they appear to know so much about the machinations of the liturgy and how it goes and everything. And that's what's actually the disturbing thing for me. It's like they're zeroing on every aspect of the mass, and nothing really is safe from their clutches. And as far as I know, they didn't really make a big song and dance when they published it. It's almost as if they kind of sent it to priests without much fanfare, hoping that it wouldn't get much attention.
Yeah, and if we remember, that's how the statutory instrument was published. It was published quietly so that nobody would see it. And then, of course, it was a statutory instrument that ended up being the massive story that went around the news that essentially outdoor confession was made illegal and priests traveling to various religious services was illegal. And so this has been published in the same kind of context. It was technically sent around to dioceses and parishes and priests, but it was certainly not published in a way that they actually really wanted people to study it and be aware of it, which defeats the whole purpose of it, because if you go into a train station or go into a bus station, wherever you're going, you know that you're expected to wear a face mask or whatever it is, because you see the signs up on the wall. All right, so they want you to know it. So at least that's fair. But with this, the fact that they released it, but in a way that it wasn't going to be studied, that's the bizarre thing. So that's kind of what we're going to have a look at today. If you want to,
Great.
Jerome, just introduce everyone to the key points there at the beginning of the document, which we'll have up on the screen here.
Yes. So starting off, I suppose the key points that kind of drew most of our attention, besides like the soloist, that kind of weird point there, was topics about confession, or sorry, confession is one, but communion. Now the legality of this seems it's not fully clear to me, because there's a lot of the use of the word should here and things like that. But I mean, when the government says should, that might be a precursor to eventually making it must, by legal statutory instrument. Some of the things they say is communion should no longer be administered on the tongue. And even this bizarre thing, like, I mean, it's like I was saying, it seems like there was a bizarre level of sort of like imagining about, how can we get into these people's business as much as possible? They suggest having tiny little paper cups, basically, with a communion in it, and left on an altar that people just come up and like grab, like a takeaway service. And any leftover paper cups, which would have microscopic particles of the host, the real presence of our Lord Jesus Christ, which we all believe in as Catholics, they recommend just chucking those in the bin somewhere. I don't think they say necessarily throw the communion hosts in the bin, but the receptacles. And any priest who understands the real presence of the concept of the Eucharist and the real presence of Christ in the Mass would wouldn't go along with that, because it'd be sacrilegious.
Yeah, and it's incredible that if you look at the document, what it says is that communion should be distributed into the hands, and then it says in big letters, not onto the tongue. Now, like you can go to any you can go to places like Tesco, you can go to Krispy Kreme or McDonald's or wherever you're going now, and I know they're not putting the food on the tongue for you, but you can be exchanging the food hand to hand or whatever now. And so this is a very weird, specific thing, especially when the priest hands you the communion. I mean, it's if the priest is negative and has gotten a vaccine and everything, it's strange that that there's still such a regimental thing. I mean, by the time most people are going back to mass, you would expect that everyone will have received, or the majority of people who are getting it will have received it. The other thing it says is the whole should be placed in the hand of the recipient in such a way as to avoid hand contact. Okay, I suppose at least that's a bit of consistency. But then it says priests and ministers should be trained in a technique of placing the host in the recipient's hand in a manner that avoids hand contact. Communicants should be told how the communion host will be delivered. And then it says what you said, the elements of communion can also be placed in individual disposable cups or containers and left separate on a tray or table for collection. And it says then, now this is the big one here. Communicants could then approach and pick up an individual container for themselves while making sure not to touch any other hosts. The disposable cups or containers should be placed in a designated receptacle afterwards. Now, you have to wonder to yourself if, this is just us thinking aloud here, but you'd have to wonder if any organizations who would advocate for that type of stuff within the church have been in touch with the HSC recommending this, because some of them have been outspoken saying that communion on the tongue shouldn't be allowed. And we know they've been doing that because that's the way they were trained the past 50 years, the way they were formed. So it's very strange. It's very specific. I mean, one thing, if you look at religious settings now, unless I've missed this, but I don't think I have, it doesn't recommend if you're going into a mosque that you should leave your shoes on, which you would think that's a hygienic thing to do if we're talking about hygiene. And it's surely, as important as, if they're purely talking about hygiene, placing communion in the hands. So it's strange that, as you say, there's something that seems very sinister about how detailed it is. They know more about communion, it seems, than most Catholics, and they've really gone to town on it.
Yes, you mentioned mosques. I saw another reference to mosques when they talk about praying mats, and of course, there's only praying mats. I mean, it's the only thing in mosques. It's not in Catholic churches. So it seems that on the face of it, it looks like, oh no, this is just general guidance for any religious body. But it's quite obvious that it's so zeroed in on Catholic doctrine and rubrics and our practices. Yeah, I just can't get over the suspicion that it's very mean-spirited, and it's almost like they want to sanitize the experience of Mass as much as possible. And it's like, the traditional way of receiving. So let's just take it back a little bit. As far as I know, the traditional reason for distributing the communion on the tongue is because we believe that every single host contains the true essence of Jesus Christ, blood, soul, and divinity, and tiny particles can be rubbed off that, basically. So distribute it directly from the chalice to the priest's hand onto the tongue, minimize the possibility of any stray pieces falling down. And of course, in older times, the altar boy would have had the paten underneath the recipient at the time to collect any tiny particles. And after, if you would have noticed in masses, they would sort of wipe the chalice into wipe the contents of the paten containing the little particles into the chalice of wine, which the priest will then drink at the end. So it's very respectful of everything like that. And it's almost like deep down, these people know how sacred this is to us, and they just want to, I don't want to get paranoid or conspiratorial, but it seems like it's very maliciously intended to just take away our most sacred rubrics of the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose for a lot of people listening, I mean, they probably do go to mass and receive communion in the hand, so they not everybody's versed in why that's such a contentious issue, and it is for the reasons that you've mentioned. It's also for the other reason, which is that the priest's hands are consecrated, and Susan from the parish council's hands are not, and so that's kind of why a lot of people will only go to the priest at mass for communion. But the other thing is that it's one of the funny things in it was that it banned concelebration, which, like, a traditionalist will look at that and say, well, a lot of traditionalists don't like when there's 10 priests on the altar, because they think concelebration can feed into some of the more modernist things that have happened. So well, that was an interesting one. Now, I don't know. I thought that was an odd one. I don't know if you picked up on that.
There are
one.
some aspects of those, as you know, like some traditional orders, especially if you have like there's different levels of masses. Just say there's a visiting a VIP, let's call them. If it's a high-ranking bishop or cardinal, you might have something called like a high pontifical mass, and the altar would actually have several, not just a priest, but several co-celebrants. But in the traditional order, you'd have acolytes and deacons all assisting with the service. So that would be impacted as well. It would look like to me.
Yeah, and the other thing, I suppose, when one of the other occasions that it mentioned in the following part of the document was, so I suppose the thing about concelebration is it is kind of a thing when the church gets together, like, as you said, maybe important occasions or something, So the other one, when lay people get together, is that it mentioned funerals, and the stuff that was in funerals I thought was just quite bizarre. It said, let's read real quick. So now I know some of this stuff was actually made public before, but they have updated it since. So it's just to kind of make people aware, because I remember reading something here, the one that it says about the Book of Condolences, which is just strange. It just says, signing books of condolences should be suspended due to the risk of infection. Alternatives include issuing condolences through social media. Okay, so send them a tweet or something. Online websites, text, send them a text, or by letter. Okay, they don't say postcard. I shouldn't be laughing, but I mean, you just wonder who wrote this. And then it says, the big one here is, don't publish the funeral arrangements in a newspaper or online. Just let people know if they're coming. And then this was the big one for me. I thought this was really out of line. It says, carrying the coffin poses a particular concern because it requires 4 to 6 people to stand close to each other. As per the government's current advice, carrying of coffins should be suspended during the current phase. Now, you could meet up with those people, and if you were playing for the Ireland rugby team with men, or the women's Ireland rugby team, you could do a scrum of 15 or 12 or whatever it is, and you could do that. But if you want to meet just 6 of you again, this is where it doesn't add up. 6 people. How long does it take to walk from the front to the back of the church? A couple of minutes, and you're telling me it's going to spread in that time, and it's telling you to suspend that. And then it says guards of honor must observe social distancing requirements. So you can have, you can do the guard of honor, but you can't carry the coffin. And obviously there's stuff there about the music as well. And, there's just some stuff in it where you just think to yourself, someone should have said, that's not right. That's very cruel to have someone worrying about that. And what you're actually doing is, this is the thing about the whole, people are probably listening. Some people probably think when they're listening, right, that we're just complaining, right? But you have to remember that if you've put all this in writing and someone's a priest and they're at mass, right, they just have to do one little one of these things wrong, right? And someone can go to the guards about it. And people have gone to the guards about it, and you've created a whole, like, the guards have taken a lot of the flack for this stuff, right? But who's ringing the guards? Like, the guards, to be fair to them, it's like any job. There's good and bad people, but who's ringing the guards? And there's a lot of ordinary people, even practicing Catholics who are ringing the guards on their own priests because they're not following some of these things that don't even make any sense. And they're ringing the guards on people going to funerals. And I think people need to just step back a bit and say, you know, these rules some of them just don't make any sense. And so I think there's a real, it's inhuman, some of it. And, you know, one of the big stories people have been talking about is the treatment of the Muslims in China, the Uyghurs. And one of the things that has been said about them is that the Chinese were trying to deprogram them from their religion and deprogram them from having their families and having a close-knit community. And that's what some of this looks like. It looks like deprogramming, that they're, you know, someone, and now we're not going to share what we found, but if you don't have to look too hard, you can find social media posts belonging to the people who are responsible for this document, who are mocking Holy Communion, and they're mocking the fact that it's banned, and they're telling people to just post it out in the letterbox if they want to get their first communion. So, you know, you have to think to yourself that some of this stuff is not reasonable, and you have to think to yourself, you know, the church needs to be realistic about how far this has gone, you know, and the fact that they have let themselves be singled out, and it seems like it's gone too far now. And they might say to themselves, oh, good times, you know, good times are coming again because Mass can be back on Monday. But look, they need to start listening to what these people are saying. They want their schools gone. They want their lands seized. They want, I mean, they have no problem with arresting some of them on essentially show trials based on stuff that may or may not have happened in the past. And so, you know, it's like, I'll give you one example of this that's just so strange. It's because this is on kissing objects, icons, or symbols. I mean, again, you know, if you search this particular document, which is on religious things, the word mosque is only in there once. All right. And so this one here, it says, you know, it spreads easily between people. Members of the congregation should be reminded not to touch or kiss objects, icons, or symbols. Posters should be alerted to display people not to touch or kiss them due to the risk of infection. And then it says ritual objects used as part of religious service should only be touched by one celebrant. Well, I suppose maybe that one's fair enough. But the other one is on the statues. You go into a church and you want to touch the statue, you can't. But I mean, again, you could go into Tesco, pick something up, put it back down. And so I know for a year it's kind of been a bit tiresome to people just to hear people point out the contradictions over and over again. But we're getting to a point now where stuff has happened, which, you know, everybody knows some of the stuff that's happened, and we're just not going to mention it. But it has to come to a point now where there's going to be decades ahead where people keep talking about how the church is getting smaller. And if it's getting smaller, people have to kind of learn to adapt it to stand up for itself a bit better.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things you mentioned there about, I think you might have been alluding to a recent tweet from the guards basically saying they are open up a criminal inquiry into things that may or may not have happened in the mother and baby homes controversy. And like, it was very bizarre to see a tweet from the official law enforcement service of Ireland on Garda Síochána when there has been no precedent, not an even credible allegation. So it seems like I would have thought that these things need to go to the Director of Public Prosecutions first, and they handle it. The guards, as far as I know, they're supposed to enforce the law instead of making it, and it's up to the DPP to decide if there is a case, and if there is, well, okay, then the guards will be involved, and then they can draw up charges and this sort of thing. It does seem like it's very almost badly acted a campaign against the church on several different levels. And yeah, if they can be this spiteful in the level of detail to which Catholics can't be permitted to practice their faith, this level of spiteful detail does not exist in for donut shops, or going for Tesco, or going to a date that you organized through Tinder or something. There's it's quite obvious that it's to me that it's a level of spiteful persecution to Catholics, just because I don't fully know why.
And I suppose that kind of what you mentioned there kind of brings us to towards the end here, kind of just on one of the people who's written really well on this is Eugene Jordan, and he has a new book out which people should check out. We'll leave the link in the description here, and hopefully,
it's excellent.
Yeah, hopefully Eugene will come on with us another day and chat about the book.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to say was, I suppose the best thing to kind of summarize it is that there was an article in. Now, I thought in my head it was in the New York Times. I can't remember what it was in. We'll post the link in the description here. It was, the title of it was that Ireland and Quebec, it said, flex their post-Catholic muscle, right? And they were kind of celebrating the fact that Ireland and Quebec had basically become these, like, you know, globalist kind of directionless places, you know, and they weren't pointing out that both places have really, really lost their way, and they're just not the great places to live they once were before. So I suppose that's what I would say. The fact that there's people now who want to let us know that in their minds the church's power is gone. And as Eugene points out in his book, you know, the power was never as dramatic as people say it was, but they want to let us know. They want to put their foot on our necks and let us know that they're in charge now. And so we'll just have to adjust. And we hope by pointing this out in the video, it's a small little pointer to people, you know, to just have a think about it. There's no similar document for any other setting.
Correct. I just want, before we finish up, I just want to bring up a point which I thought particularly malicious. So I referenced there that there's a lot of use of the word should in this document. So it's legal. It's the legal ramifications aren't fully clear at this time. But this is different. One line says choral performances and audience participation, e.g. carol singing, are not permitted as they increase the transmission of COVID-19. Now, singing to people when they go to mass, it's a beautiful thing. It allows you to participate, and it's something about the whole congregation being as one voice and singing a particularly beautiful song. For example, like this is the month of May, and it's one of my favorite hymns is Queen of the May. I mean, it's as a Catholic, I mean, I believe it's my right to sing that song. It's part of my faith. But if you obey these people, no, you can't sing Queen of the May in May. Because of this minute possibility that, I mean, churches were already, let's face it, churches weren't exactly like packed to the gills in January 2019 before all this happened. So it's ridiculous to think that a quarter empty church with people spaced well apart, and I was what I thought was noteworthy is the very high level of compliance with all these measures when Mass was opened in the first sort of lockdown, before Mass was locked down and the pews sort of sectioned off and everything. But that line to me, it was very direct, and it was very, it's not permitted to sing anymore. I just thought it was just particularly spiteful and mean-spirited, and not actually based on science.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you could. You know, if someone walks in and people are singing, they say, "Oh, we're just praising our healthcare workers," you know, something like that.
Yeah.
Might be the only thing that works. But look, I suppose we're kind of just going to leave it there. We kind of just wanted people to see this document because a few priests had gotten in touch with us to say that this document was kind of an afterthought on telling them that Mass will be back. And a lot of them were worried because they realize people know that this document arms them to put the priests under a lot of pressure if they do even one of these unreasonable things wrong.
Yeah, maybe we'll put a link to it in the description, and we just encourage people, if you feel strongly that these rules are unfair and an overreach of the state into our right to worship as is our tradition, feel free to contact your priest or bishop to express your concern at these guidelines.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's what we saw the last few weeks that was kind of positive. People were out saying the rosary outside their churches. And one thing, I suppose this is the last thing I mentioned then as well, is that next Monday, now this is, I don't know if this was planned or not, but to coincide with Mass returning, but next Monday, Pope Francis has designated Knock as one of the shrines where people are to pray to end the pandemic. Now, last time at Knock, when it was, I can't remember what the event was. Maybe it was when Knock was made an official Marian site recently.
Yes.
Or it was upgraded or something like, sometimes my brain doesn't work. But anyway, long story short, they had closed off that people couldn't see into the Apparition Chapel. So hopefully next week, Knock encourages people to be allowed to attend this event for the Rosary, because it would be a bit of a boost, especially to people who are saying the Rosary there this weekend. So maybe if people can
definitely
can find out more about that. All right.
Great. Okay, Augustine, should we call that a wrap so for today?
Yeah. Thanks for listening. And thanks for talking again, Jerome.
No problem. See you next time. But